This is a demonstration of the ASP generator, and basically the idea behind this project is you have any reference table that you'd like to create a stored procedure to get data from the backend. This program will actually generate that stored procedure for you, and it will generate a very powerful stored procedure that can allow you to query the backend in a very sophisticated way. So let's demonstrate this. First, you have to specify the connection, SQL Server. Now this item sometimes takes a little time, but that's just a Microsoft Control issue. So we'll just have to wait for that. And then we select our database. So we click OK. So this, once we select the database, we have to pick the table. So ref products table is what we're demoing. So when I click this, when I select the ref products table, when I click generate get SP, it creates a stored procedure for me. It creates all the code that I need to use to generate my stored procedure. Now you can either have an alter. By default, it uses create proc, but if you want to alter proc, you can hit that, and it changed create proc to an alter proc. We'll put it back to create. You can also change the name of this. So I'll put 2 here, and it changed the name of the proc. So now all I have to do is hit the copy button, and it copies that into a buffer. If I go back into my SQL Server, and it's there, I'll create a new query, and we'll paste that code. And then if we run that code, it created a stored procedure for me that I can use to query the back end. So now let's demo how powerful this stored procedure is, how flexible it is. The stored procedure that was created has one parameter for each field in the database, and the parameter is always varchar max. So even if you have a date field or a numeric field or a varchar field, whatever the field may be, the parameter associated with that field for querying, for filtering, is always going to be varchar max. And so I think the easiest way to demo the flexibility of this SP is to go through some examples. So the first parameter is inactive. So when I query for 1, for example, the first parameter being 1, it gets me all the records that are inactive. And 0 means active, so if I query for 0, then it gets me all the active records. So the second parameter is ID. So if you'll notice there's so many different parameters. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parameters. So if you don't supply a parameter, then null is taken. So null is the default parameter. And what that means is if you don't supply the parameter, then it's assumed that you won't be filtering on that parameter. So in the case of this third query, we're filtering on the first parameter and the second parameter. The first parameter is inactive. Inactive equals 0, which means that you're selecting all the active records. And here you have the second parameter for which the ID of the ref product table must be greater than 2000. So if you run that, it gives you all the records for which the ID is greater than 2000. Likewise, you can also do this, greater than or equal to 2340, and there you go, 2340, 2342. And again, once again, 0 is an additional requirement. So what about, let's say, we have two ranges. In this particular scenario, you have the inactive field being 1, which means the record has to be inactive, and the ID must be greater than or equal to 2247 and less than or equal to 2281. So if we run that, you get a handful of records that meet that criteria. So here's another one, null null 4. So null null 4, that means the category ID has to be 4. So if you look at this particular query, the first two parameters are null. The third parameter is 4, that's the category ID, and the rest of the parameters are going to be null if you don't pass them. So this is going to pull everything that has category ID 4. And if you look at what category ID 4 is, category ID 4 is toys. So once again, if you go back to this, these are all your toys. Okay. Now, let's explore this query here. This is null, 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 and then the fourth parameter. So that's the description field. So when you query on that, you're querying for any record that has baseball in it, but there's also a comma, and there's another value there. So comma is used as a delimiter to denote that you're looking for one or more things. So in this particular case, you're looking for any record that has baseball within the description field, or any record that has book within the description field. And so this comma is used as an OR delimiter. Well, let's take a look at that. There you go. There's one record with a baseball, book, and there's a book right there. And you can use the comma delimiter either for a description field, or it could also be used for a numeric field as well. For example, if you take this query here, the first parameter is 0. That's the inactive field. That means it has to be inactive as 0, which means the record has to be active. Then you have the second parameter is less than or equal to 2300, or it's equal to 2326. So if we run that, you get all zeros here, and the range is less than 2300. These are all less than 2300, but there's a comma or, comma which means or, you have 2326. Okay, let's go through one more example. So here we have the first three parameters. There's null, so that's inactive ID and category. The fourth parameter is description. So here we have the first one is baseball. So we want everything with the word baseball in it. And then you have a comma. Comma is a delimiter. So the next word is book. So we want everything which has either the word baseball or the word book or the word Beijing, China. Beijing, comma, China. You'll notice that the comma is doubled here because a single comma is a delimiter, but when you want comma to mean a comma, you put a double comma. So this particular part of the query gives you all the records that have either the word baseball, book, or Beijing, comma, China within it. And then you have the next parameter is null, which is current price, and then the last parameter is modified. So this requirement is that the date has to be greater than or equal to June 14th. So let's take a look. Let's run this query, and that gives you all the records there that meet those criteria. So some of the drawbacks to this stored procedure that's created. This stored procedure that's created, it just blindly queries for whatever you give it, whatever parameters you give it. There's no check in the default stored procedure that's created for you to determine whether the query is efficient or not. So it basically is a starting point. If you wanted to put additional restrictions in your SP, for example, you might require that at least one of the fields passed in the parameter there's an index on at least one of the fields. Or you may not want them to index query on certain fields, right? So that the query that's generated is efficient. So I made some modifications on the SP as well. I have my own SP here. And I created top records in my SP. If your stored procedure has, if you call that stored procedure and retrieve too many records, then that would be inefficient. So I introduced my own parameter. I started off with the same SP that was generated here, and then I modified it to only pick the top records, the number of records that you pass in as a parameter. So it's tweaks like this that you can do to the stored procedure that gets generated for you to make it more efficient and to ensure that you don't break the system by making inefficient queries. So again, it's used as a starting point, and then you can introduce additional validations and modifications to your stored procedure to make it efficient. Okay, thanks.